and you are at a meeting of the Board of Education. We hope that everybody is doing well, and as the holiday season is upon us, Kwanzaa and so forth, we hope that you all are able to take this difficult time in our nation's history and focus on things that are positive, and that's what all the holidays bring. We know we are trying to do that. And shortly, in the next week or so, we will take a break, won't we, Madam Clerk? When will our meetings, when will we take a break from these?
Well, our final meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December 17th. And after that, we will not be back until January 4th.
All right. So a lot of things happening during that period, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, and we hope that everybody takes the time to enjoy those events. But in the meantime, we have business to take care of. Again, today is December the 15th. I'm calling this meeting to order. And as always, we begin our meetings with hearing from the citizens. Madam Clerk, I understand we have some citizen input today. Some people want to
Yes, we
speak to the board.
We do. We have two speakers joining us tonight. Our first speaker is Ms. Claire Labrosa. She should be joining us in the Zoom room at this time. Ms. Labrosa is a staff member and will be speaking about charter schools and funding. Ms. Labrosa, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm a graduate of the RCSD, an ENL teacher in the district, resident of the city of Rochester, and a parent to 3 kids, ages 2, 7, and 9. And I can't begin today without mentioning that Daniel Prude's life mattered, and he and his family deserve justice. And I stand in solidarity with our community as they protest his murder. I want to thank Commissioner White for sharing with me that the board's legislative priorities now include support for a moratorium on charter schools. Last year, $91 million were drained from the RCSD budget to go to charter schools. Our budget deficit was $86 million. This information was not highlighted for the public until the budget deficit brought it to the surface. Here's another fact. As the state threatens to cut 20% of the RCSD budget, the amount we are obligated to send to charter schools will not change at all. The presentation the state monitor made laid out 3 scenarios for the RCSD budget. Projection C lays out the 20% cut, which would be a cut of $120 million. Charter schools will see no such cuts. They will continue to get upwards of $90 million from the RCSD, while the RCSD is starved into oblivion. Why should the children of the RCSD suffer so disproportionately? We must not forget that even though the RCSD is owed over $80 million in foundation aid from last year alone, we were told by sitting elected officials, some of whom are in this Zoom right now, that our only remedy was to go to Albany and beg for a loan that now further cripples our district as we are forced to pay back $666,000 every year for 10 years. That's the same as 14 teachers, by the way, 14 teachers for our students to learn with, 14 fewer teachers. The projections made by the state monitor contain more infuriating numbers. The city of Rochester has flatlined funding for the RCSD for the last 14 years. For 14 years, the city refused to raise funding even for inflation, while the mayor's budget grew by 54%. This flat budget equates to $60 million cut from the RCSD over the last 14 years. Our board must do the following things immediately in order to address the gross inequities it has had a hand in creating for the students of the RCSD. 1, pass a resolution which denies all further charters in Rochester. 2, call on Mayor Lovely Warren and City Council to adjust the budget contribution to the RCSD for inflation at minimum, which would equal $179 million. Number 3, sue the state of New York for the foundation aid the RCSD is owed. And number 4, hold charter schools accountable now for the students they serve by holding public hearings where SPED and ELL student retention data is publicly displayed and transparency is demanded on percentages that vary from the RCSD average. There are actionable items that can be tackled now to prevent more harm to the students you serve. I look forward to seeing how you plan to make it up to the students of our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Labrosa. Okay, we have our second speaker who is joining us at this time, Leanne Dupree, a staff member talking about layoffs and safety protocols. Ms. Dupree, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Welcome. Okay, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
All right. Thank you. How are you guys tonight?
Good, good.
I've had a rough evening, honestly, and I'm a special education teacher in the district. I was sick yesterday because of the stress that I'm feeling from this potential reopening plan. I want our families to understand right now, because I'm a special education teacher and I am scared. I don't want people to be unaware of what we're going back into right now. There's currently negotiations about mask mandates in the Rochester City School District. Students may not be required or be forced to wear a mask at school, in the public areas or classroom. Testing, students can be opted out and still report in buildings. I'm concerned because I have a newborn at home and children, and it's scary to think that I have no option. Oh, I'm sorry, I was given the choice that I can take a leave unpaid or report on January 4th. So I'm having to choose between the safety of my children and my job. And there's not a chance I can get the vaccine right now. Some other questions that teachers are asking right now is, which schedule are we going to follow? The district master schedule or remote schedule? What about my care providers for my children? They're older and at risk. I don't have enough time to arrange alternative care right now. Some people are afraid right now to ask for an accommodation because of potential layoffs. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm just looking over my list. There's quite a bit. I just want you to understand, like, a lot of teachers are very uncomfortable going back. We don't feel it's safe. We're not ready. And we're not giving an option that's sustainable for us to be able to, like, survive right now. We're not giving an option to teach remotely to our students. Even if we have 2 students that are reporting in building and the rest are remote, we can't support. You know, we're going to be teaching both at the same time. It's just not what's best for kids. And I want that for our children, for our families. And honestly, yes, in a selfish way for me too, I want to be protected and know that I'm going to be safe when I do go back. And right now is not it. We're rushing this too much. There's going to be an isolation room for COVID, but if kids aren't tested and they're asymptomatic, that's going to be an issue that I can say that I have in my classroom. From the families, you know, they shared with me, they had COVID twice.
Ms. Labrosa, Ms. Dupree, my apologies. Your 3 minutes are up for addressing the board, but we do appreciate you speaking with us tonight. And if you do have any additional comments, we do ask that you send them to us, and we'll make sure that all commissioners are appraised.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I'm sorry. I'm usually more well prepared. I just really shaken up right now.
No need to apologize, Ms. Dupree. We can only imagine the courage it takes and the stability of thought to even articulate 3 minutes worth of what you shared with us. So really, on behalf of the board, there's no need to apologize. We thank you for providing us that very personal and direct description of your thought process and your concerns. We appreciate that. And to Ms. Labrosa, we appreciate your very thoughtful, very clear mindedness about what needs to be done to make up the deficit. We only had 2 speakers today. And the reason why I summarize them is that you can see the value just in having 2 speakers. The board can learn a lot, the community can hear a lot. And again, to Ms. Dupree and Ms. Labrosa, thank you for your 2 very different comments, but you both used the 3 minutes very productively, and the board appreciates that. Have a good evening and continue to be safe.
Thank you. I hope I can. Bye.
We hope so too. And it is all of our work to see to it that our staff and our students and the families that are connected to them when they go home are provided that safety. Now, this is not a perfect science, but Dr. Myers and her team and the Board of Education are dedicated to doing our best under the circumstances and given the science and the health care that's available to protecting folks. All right, next item on the agenda is some special topics. Let me make sure my participant screen is on because I don't want to miss anybody raising their hands. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right. Next item on the agenda is special topics. The first one is consideration of the October claims audit report. Anissa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Nairaki Smith did present to the board on November 17th, the October claims audit report. As you're aware, you received the report the month after the work has been completed. The board clerk noticed that there was no formal action from the board as far as formally accepting the report. It's not a legal requirement. However, I did want to make sure I gave the board an opportunity to formally receive the October report. It was decided by the board that it would be quarterly reporting after there was the presentation on November 17th. So I did want to make sure if the board's desire is to formally accept the claims audit report, I am going to ask for that to take place right now. And then going forward, we're going to do it on a quarterly basis when they formally present to the board.
Commissioner,
Oh,
thank you, Commissioner. Well, that's fine. I was going to say Commissioner Powell, since that's your committee, but I hear Commissioner Malloy made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. All those in favor of accepting the report as described by, that we heard and is just described by Auditor General Henry Wheeler, indicate by turning on your screens and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, looks like the ayes have it. Thank you, Anissa. Next item on our agenda is a motion that was tabled. That motion related to a proposal to reduce board salaries by 20%. I will describe a conversation that I had with our general counsel once we go into closed session, but I would ask for your indulgence and allow for a motion to go into closed session at the end of our meeting. And then for those out there in the public listening, depending on what happens with our conversation with our general counsel, we may or may not come back and have an update on where we are at with that particular proposal. So I ask, and my colleagues ask, for your indulgence as this issue requires that we discuss this matter with our attorney. And I would also add for you folks out there, there's no behind the scenes conversations. The board can't just get together at you know, a area restaurant and just start talking about the proposal that came up last week. It was tabled to today to make sure that if there's any conversation that goes beyond a conversation with our lawyer, that we have that conversation in front of you all. So we've not had a chance to confer and talk about the proposal. We'll talk to our lawyer, which, as you all know, is typically done in confidence. And then we'll come back out and perhaps, based on our conversation with our lawyer, we may have something to say about it. But in the meantime, we have some other business we have to take care of, important business. And that business is being chaired by our finance chair, Commissioner Beatrice LeBron. Beatrice, the gavel is yours.
Thank you, President White. And actually, before we officially start the finance meeting, there were some emails sent out by Commissioner Powell and some resolutions that she wanted to essentially bring onto the agenda for the finance. I will not be accepting those as chair. So before you officially turn it over, I didn't know, President White, in this special meeting format, if you wanted to put those on the agenda. I will not be putting them on the agenda tonight. So I don't know how you want to handle this, and I can ask our lawyer to join and give any advice on that information. So
let me just say, Commissioner LeBron, and to have a moment of clarity and honesty, today I was trying to meet a deadline for one of my cases. I did very little, and this is an apology to Commissioner Powell, I had very little opportunities to look at any emails. So I do not know what you're referring to. As I indicated at our last meeting, it is always important that board members have the opportunity to consider matters before them. Commissioner Powell, is this something that has to be addressed today? Because again, I did not have the chance to look at any of my emails today.
So President White, the materials I submitted were proposed resolutions. They could be brought directly to the board's business meeting on Thursday. I think as the Finance Committee presentation unrolls, some of my proposals will come out organically, so we don't need to officially have it on the agenda. Thank you.
You know, in terms of it being on the agenda, if that is appropriate, and again, I have not seen these particular emails. I certainly don't have any problem communicating with Ms. Wade, and I'm doing that right now. If the issues aren't appropriately addressed today at the meeting, and I would ask that everybody pay attention to the quorum and the agenda that we have. So if it is not appropriate to bring up today, then no worries. Ms. Wade, our clerk, will get it on the agenda for the next business meeting. So again, Commissioner LeBron, the gavel is yours.
Thank you. I just want to be sure, because we do have a parent rep now who does come to all of our previews, who's juggling, managing her children, working as a business owner, and attends these previews and is doing just as much reading as I am and the rest of us to get caught up with information. And I also don't want to bring forth things that were emailed at 4 and 4:30 today to anybody, including myself. So with that said, I'm gonna ask for a motion to review and accept the minutes of the November 17th Finance Cal meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Kalia, did you get that? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. That passes. Next up is the December Finance Resolutions Review. That package should say Financial Cow on it. So Kalia, are you going to pull them up on the screen?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
pulling those up right now. And Carlene, let me know when you're ready to start.
Are you going to go over the resolutions first, or are we doing the presentation? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. On my agenda for discussion first is the December Finance Resolutions Review, Kalia.
Let me pull those 1 second.
And then after that, Carlene, I have your reports and trend analysis data and your presentation after that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on resolutions presented here, which start at 5:51 and ends? It's a pretty big packet today. Ends with resolution 567.
Commissioner LeBron, Commissioner Malloy has her hand raised.
Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. I have just a quick question to administration about resolution 569. It's the resolution regarding entering into an agreement with Erie One BOCES. And it's just something that I'm not necessarily familiar with, if that's a common practice. I was wondering why Erie One BOCES and not, it seems pretty specific to Erie One BOCES, but why not a local BOCES? Is it unusual for us to work with a BOCES or BOCES partners so far away?
I can answer that, Commissioner Malloy. It's not. I mean, sometimes there are just programs, or in this case, services that are uniquely tied to a BOCES. So you might have to go outside. Our typical BOCES we would work with that are closest would be Monroe 1 and Monroe 2. But in some instances, if there's a unique program, I mean, when I, for example, was in Ithaca, I may have used Erie, or I may have used even Monroe 1 or 2. So it's not atypical.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add, Commissioner Malloy, this actually came up in previews, and something Rebecca and I were both asking questions around. And so there is some response from Glenn on it, and I will ask that the entire board receives the questions and the answers from the discussion.
Regarding that particular resolution? Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you so much.
Yep. Rebecca, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Thank you. I just had a question about the pre-K center. It's resolution 556. It was my understanding that the current pre-K center isn't, I mean, of course it's not full, but that it was having trouble with enrollment, and we're still moving forward with the renovations for the second pre-K center. So we didn't know if there was anybody that could speak to that.
Dr. Morris, is that something you can answer, or Mike, is that something that you can?
I would defer to Mike.
Okay.
On the renovation of the facility.
Just kidding myself on camera. My apologies.
Okay.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. My apologies there. This is actually a final payment for a previous renovation. We did had some two scheduled projects at two of these buildings. This is for building 57 prior to the decision to turn it into offices. The project was already in the queue prior to that decision. In regards to the pre-K centers, we did a project over the last 2 years. The second project was to do some renovations there because the direction last year was to, at 44, was to develop it as a pre-K center. So in terms of the enrollment part of it was part of the driver to that, because I guess I'm speaking just from renovation purposes, that in order to turn the building, School 44, into a pre-K center, we need to do some renovations over there in order to do that. So that was the rationale for maintaining the renovations in that particular building. We evaluated that right up through the end of the spring. I made a final decision, I think, in April of 20. 556, though, is actually a final payment. It doesn't authorize any new work.
I did have one more question, if I could, on a different resolution. On 565 for the Medicare Advantage plan coverage for 3,600 retired professionals of $235.13 per month, which is coming out to over $10 million for a year. And I just wasn't sure. I mean, yeah, so it's a very uncomfortable number. Having parents that are part of a Medicare Advantage plan that is, $100, and it's extremely extensive. So something that's more than twice that price, I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around it.
Dr. Myers, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I was. Carlene, is that one that you can answer?
Sure. It's actually put forth by the benefits department, but I could do my best. I think one of the factors here is the fact that the RTA has, the retirees, those who are within their bargaining unit, and they pay 0% towards their health insurance in retirement. And so it's my understanding that that's what's driving that cost. With regard to the specific plans, I would have to actually defer back to Chris and his team. But again, if we want to add this to the question log, I know that we can bring forward
I
some
was going to say,
information.
we
on
can add it to the question log.
the problem.
Cal, did you get that piece, please and thank you?
I did, thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about any of the other resolutions? And this is just a preview. These are resolutions that we'll be voting on at Thursday's board business meeting. So I think if anything comes up between now and Thursday, you can always email the questions to Kalia to ask administration, or you can ask them Thursday at the board business meeting. Okay, we're gonna move on. Next up, Carlene, I'm turning over to you so that you can start your presentations. On my agenda, it says review and discuss financial reports. So the November 2020 financial report and trend analysis, and then followed by your presentation. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good evening, everyone. It's certainly an honor once again to be here before you this evening and to serve the students of RCSD. As you might recall in the meeting, the audit meeting last week, there was a question raised by Vice President Elliott regarding what do board members need to pay attention to or look at, or what questions should they be asking to ensure that our finances are staying in alignment with what their understanding is of our finances. So what we did here is we just rearranged our report a little bit because Kathy Barrett, our external auditor, had actually said one of the primary things that the board members should be focusing in on is absolutely our cash balance. And even though we go through it month by month, I just wanted to make sure that we all have an understanding of how to read the report because it is critically important. And sometimes I know numbers scare people, especially when we're dealing with the numbers and the dollar amounts that we are. So I'd just like to take a little extra time tonight to go through that. You may also recall that Kathy had shared with us the other area to pay attention to is trend analysis. So that means what's happening with our revenues and what's happening with our expenditures in a year-over-year format. So we'll be touching on that this evening as well. So Callie, if you could please go to page 4 of 18, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much. So what we have before us tonight is our cash flow analysis. Again, lots of numbers on a page, and sometimes when we reduce it, it's difficult to see. What we tried to do here this evening is actually highlight the column that we're focusing in on. So here we are at the end of November, November 30th statements. And what we're looking at this evening is a cash flow projection. We have the actual period that we have just completed. So as of November 30th, that actual section is now completed. It's history. It is recorded as it stood on November 30th. And then going forward from there, we have a cash flow projection, which receives a great deal of attention within my department. And at the top of the page, you're going to see that this projection is actually using a 5% reduction in state aid because that's where what we still feel is very, very real for us, a very real possibility of what we could experience. And so we want to base it on reality, not on anything that would be too conservative or too liberal. So when I take a look at this report, the first thing I do is I always go to the line that is marked total receipts and deposits for that month. And that's the item that the number that is highlighted in blue. And so you see that that's $73 million, $73.7 million was received in, and we have a beginning balance coming forward from the last month as well on the very top of the page. So the beginning balance plus all the money received comes up to $73.7 million. The immediate next thing that I do is take a look down below at the previous year, and I look for the same line. So again, I highlighted that in blue for you. And you'll see that there's a vast difference between what we saw last year at this time and where we are this year at this time. And then I tried to drill down and say, okay, what happened within that 73.7 million and where are we actually seeing the differences? And I start to compare my numbers. And what you're going to see is, just like we've been saying, the impact, Kali, if you can go up just a tad bit, please. The impact absolutely is within the state and federal aid number. It's significantly reduced from where it was last year at this time, again, the same date, November 30th. And you're also going to see a significant reduction in our grant revenue as well. So again, there's nothing surprising to me in that, because that's been something that we've been saying right along, that this is what we anticipated to have happen. It is what is happening. So we are right on course with what we had projected. Be it as it may, it is what we're facing, and we know we have to contend with that. The next number that I go down to is then total disbursements. That's now highlighted in green. And so you have the $89 million there. Likewise, I go down to the year before and I say, what happened last year at this time? And there too, you're going to see a significant difference year over year. And in this case, it's a positive difference, if you will, because the expenditures are actually being reduced, right? So expenditures are reduced and revenue is reduced. So that means we need to continue to keep that in mind so that we keep our budget in alignment. And part of that reduction in expenditures this year obviously has been based upon COVID and the impacts there. You'll see that the greatest, up on top again, Kalia, the greatest reduction is going to be in the accounts payable. And within that accounts payable, what you're going to see, or what you will see in the other reports you have before you this evening, is you're going to see a reduction in contractual relationships with our vendors. The very last thing that I do with this report is I go immediately to the very far right-hand side, and I take a look at what the last month is doing. So at our year end, I take a look at what's happening in June. What are we forecasting to happen in June of this year? So June of this fiscal year, I should say, June 30th, 2021. And I match that again against where we were in June 2019. And so when you match those numbers, you're going to see it's pretty much right on course to where we were. So even though it's, you could say, well, that's positive. In one way, it is positive. In the other way, we didn't make a great deal of headway, even though we have already given up 13.1 million in reductions. We are pulling back on expenditures as much as we can because of COVID-related issues. And even with all of that we've gone through as a district, we are only approximately $2 million to the better of where we were last year. So again, we've got to keep our eye on those numbers and just know that that's a part of what we're facing should the 5% become a reality. And truly with the impact that we have had already in transportation aid and Medicaid reimbursement, again, it is a reality, so we have to do more. If we flip over to the next slide, please, Kalia. What you're going to see here too is that slide that we keep bringing forward to you, and it's showing our cash flow, again, at the 5% reduction, and where we are currently within that cash flow and the projection forward, and there where we would be if the RAN, again, was pulled by the city. So right now it's favorable, but we again have to keep in mind that we need to be conservative because of not knowing the future yet. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that should anything happen to that RAN, we have to come up with a way to pay our bills. When you take a look at the revenue for November, again, revenue, as you saw on the cash flow as we went through that, if we could flip one more slide, Callie. When we take a look at the revenue for this period ended, it's going to match exactly what I had said previously within the cash flow. So the thing to remember about our financial documents is they all flow together. One tells a story of the other. And so if you notice inconsistencies within the story, that's something that a board member would raise their hand to ask the question. Within the presentation that I will be giving tonight, we'll talk a little bit about trend analysis with these numbers and go over that for you as well so you know what to look for. I don't know if anyone has any questions. There's nothing, again, out of the norm within the expenditures, other than we are continuing to looking for ways to reduce our expenditures, which would be the next spreadsheet. But I'm happy to take any questions you may have on the financials this evening. Those truly are the highlights.
I don't see any hands up, Carlene, but I'll ask before we move on to the next, to your finance report, presentation, I mean, if anybody has any questions about this report. All right, Carlene.
Okay.
Report's up next.
One quick question. Did you want to motion to move it to the business
Yeah.
meeting for action?
Yep.
I'll make that.
Thank you.
Did you get that, Kalia? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
All right, Kalia, are you putting up Carlene's presentation?
I am. 1 second,
Okay.
please.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide, that would be wonderful. Okay. I just want everyone to know that, again, I'm tying our presentation this evening back in part to the comments made by Kathy Barrett at the audit committee meeting, just so that we stay in sync with each other and work off of the information from each other. And so what I wanted to do was, again, just share with you the importance of trend analysis. So when you take a look at the revenues that we actually are reflecting on our reports as of November 30th, and again, I'm comparing that to the reports of November 30th, 2019, we will see the following reductions in each of the fund areas. So again, it's not unanticipated. It is in alignment with the forecast that Dr. Jallo and I have been sharing with you, as she has shared it with you in her financial report, and I have shared it with you in past meetings. And it's important to look at trend analysis because it shows us what has occurred in the past, what we are seeing now in the present, and what we can anticipate to see in the future. So again, this is the breakdown of revenues, and on the very next slide, you're going to have a similar breakdown of expenditures. There you go. Okay, and so where we passed a resolution back in November to amend our budget. We needed to amend that budget because some of our revenues were actually overstated and our expenditures were understated. And so now we took that action, we made those adjustments, and now when we're looking at, again, trend of year over year between our expenditures, you'll now see that our expenditures have been reduced by these amounts, excuse me, in the respective funds. So again, that means that we're doing what we can to control our destiny, if you will. I know there have been questions raised with regard to why do our numbers change? Why do they change from one meeting to the next? It's because we are working originally with budgeted numbers. Those budgeted numbers then turn into what was actually experienced. And then the actual numbers are used then to forecast the future. So it's normal for numbers to continue to change because as we learn from them, as we experience them, we become smarter as far as what we need to do with our finances moving forward. My responsibility as your CFO is to do nothing more than to bring these numbers forth to you so that you can make the decisions that you need to make. I present the numbers as they are factually, And I support my superintendent and my board 110% with whatever you decide to do with this information, to use it as we move forward, not only in bringing this current year of 2021 to an end, but then as we move into the budget cycle for the 21-22 school year. Please turn to the next slide. And again, on this slide, it's nothing more than to review the numbers that we have been sharing for a number of meetings, past meetings. We keep bringing these numbers forward to you. I want us again to keep, just like on that cash flow report, keep your eye on that line down there that's starred, because we are still forecasting a deficit. Now, the good news that I didn't mention, which was exciting news to me today, was that we did receive our state aid payment in full from New York State. And that was in the amount of 49 million and 49.4 million. So that was good news. There were no deductions from that state aid payment. That was very encouraging. And we also received in excess of 14 million on that UPK grant that we've been waiting to come in. So now as we move forward into December, our numbers are going to look a tad bit better. Again, this was one more month that we've crossed a hurdle. We're not out of the woods by a long shot, but that certainly was good news to have brought forth. I will say too that our superintendent has given the directive and continues to give the directive that we need to bring forward additional reductions in our respective budgets as her executive cabinet. So she has asked for us to look for up to 10% in two different scenarios using 5% and 10%. Those reductions then too will be applied in our December numbers. So you will once again see numbers changing, and based on that, you will see a forecast change. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Fund balance was brought up in the audit committee as well. And we had actually brought it up in a previous finance committee meeting and saying, what will we be doing with the fund balance that resulted primarily, almost exclusively as a result of COVID from the 1920 school year. And so the proposal was brought forward as to how the monies would be allocated. And again, mind you, this will not come to fruition if we cannot pull ourselves out of that deficit. If we are in a deficit, as you saw on the previous page, regretfully, the fund balance will have to be used to offset that deficit. So that's why we're working so diligently to pull ourselves up to come to minimally a balanced budget so that we can realize these applications, if you will, within our fund balance. So if we had had fund balance to fall back on, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in where we're focusing so diligently upon and so intently upon all of our expenditures. What we're trying to do here for the vast majority of these is absolutely replenish those savings accounts or those reserves that were fully depleted in 18-19. And the concerning part about those reserves being fully depleted in 18-19 is that you will see that it impacts our employees. So we had zero money left in our workman's compensation account. We had zero money left in our reserve, which allowed us to offset litigation against the district. That meant that it would be, if there was nothing budgeted within the budget itself, be a direct hit again to our general fund. We'd have to find that money. We had zero money left remaining to cover our retiree health insurance and payouts, if you will. Again, as Kathy had mentioned, if our doors closed, we have over $1 billion obligation to our employees of the district. Right now, we have nothing to offset that, that expenditure, that reality. We do have money allocated and put aside, if you will, for additional pandemic aid reductions. That means that we are anticipating not receiving additional aid, if you will. So this will offset any reduction that we have in that area that we did not plan on. We do have money set aside to offset the transportation aid loss that we are anticipating within our revenues. We have received the state aid runs that has become a reality as of the December runs. We now see where our transportation aid has exactly been reduced down to 47 million. And you might remember the amount that was budgeted was 72 million. So now that has become a reality. Due to the lack of participation in our food service programs, we had predicted at the close of 1920 that we were going to see a deficit in that food service program of $3 million. That has since ticked up a little bit more. We are now over 4.1 million as of the last count. And again, so we're keeping an eye on that, because anytime your food service fund runs into a deficit, it is the obligation of the general fund to make the food service fund whole. Encumbrances are assigned as well. These are for any obligations that we have at the end of the year that carry forward into the new year. So it's monies that we know at the end of the year that we have obligations that we have to cover. And typically these obligations are due to be paid out in full by October 31st. So this was the estimation on the book at that time as to what that dollar amount would be. The next item down, even though it says facilities modernization, in this particular case, this money is allocated towards, or being allocated towards, primarily to the PeopleSoft upgrade. A software upgrade to the extent in which we will be working on is allowable as a facilities capital project, if you will. So capital projects here are known as facility modernization, but I want to make it clear that the brunt of the monies that have been put aside in this assigned fund balance account, if you will, is to help us with that need that has been identified and approved by the board within the financial plan for the PeopleSoft upgrade. The last item down here, as far as the assigned goes, is for our self-funded health insurance. Again, this account was fully depleted in 18-19. That means that should COVID have the impact that is anticipated, as all the professionals are telling us it's anticipated, our health insurance rates, once we get through the brunt of COVID, are going to shoot up. That means that as they increase, we don't have anything to offset those rates as they increase. So again, this assignment is on behalf of our employees, because if the rates take a drastic turn and increase by even 5%, that burden then will have to fall upon the employees because of the fact we have nothing to offset. There is no reserve to help offset that increase in our health insurance rates. The very last item down is unassigned, and that's what it is. It doesn't have a specific purpose per se. It can be used at the discretion of the superintendent. I think the important thing too to remember about fund balance is that it is cash in the bank, and cash in the bank means that our credit rating will improve. It means that I've heard so many board members in the past say we need to work on gaining our independence from the city. Fund balance is a way of doing that, because we are not reliant upon the city to go to them and say, may we borrow a RAN? May we borrow additional money? It allows us to take more control of our own destiny, if you will. It also will allow us, again, in that unassigned especially, to address strategic plan, academic plan, and financial plan priorities that have been established and approved by the board. And so it is important to keep the balance at a healthy level. And
Commissioner Powell has her hand up.
Certainly.
Well, first of all, I just want to know if you want to take questions now or at the end of your presentation, because I can wait.
I only have a couple more slides, if you don't mind.
I'll wait.
I'll be happy to take it at the end. On the next slide, and I think Commissioner Powell, this will help out too. There was a question with regard, or statement made at the the audit meeting regarding the different types of fund balances. And on this particular slide, I just wanted to be sure that people had this as a tool to work with going forward. This does define all of the different types of fund balance. This was taken directly from the CAFR on page 25. So I know that if you read the CAFR, and when I should say you read the CAFR, these were spelled out exactly there. The one thing that I would like to say is with regard to the committed fund balance, it states that the constraints imposed by the board or the designee, so it may be used as specified by the board as designee. The way we handle it here at RCSD is we take action using resolutions for those with those monies. The other item that I just wanted to bring your attention to is that in the assigned fund balance, when it speaks of intended use by the district's upper management, the board has approved the superintendent and myself as the individuals that can make a recommendation as far as how those monies are to be used and how they can be allocated. So we are appreciative of the board's support in that area. Let's see here. And the last page is just where we are with the budget development process for 21-22. We are at that point already. Just wanted to let you know that given the calendar that you had approved back in October, we've now taken that calendar and built the foundation, we're using that as a foundation to build our internal budget calendar to make sure now that every task that we have that to complete between now and the time the budget is approved by yourselves in the city, all the dates and tasks are mapped out. The cabinet today had agreed to the calendar as well and showing their support. And so where we are now is that we're taking our time to carefully and purposefully start to build the budget. And that means that we are taking a look at all of our programs and services. We have to determine those that are going to continue because they are successful and those that need to be removed because they have not proven to be successful. We're also working on the projection of all our expenditures. And so we have built the expenditures within the budget and are building upon the same assumptions that were built on and utilized within the financial plan. And so again, just to keep everything consistent, it's one document building off of another. We are estimating our revenues, taking a look at that and trying to understand what's coming up. We realize that the governor will not have any additional information out to us. Hopefully, the most hopeful date that I had heard was January 20th. But again, we need to be reactive. Once those numbers become more clearly defined to us, we will use those numbers to build our budget as well. And the very last is that we have to make sure that using everything that we know, that we are going to properly use the resources we have available, help us project our fund balance going forward. And we absolutely will be delivering a balanced budget to the board and to the city this year. So I will take any questions. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Carlene. Commissioner Powell.
Okay, if you could go back to slide page 6, I think. That one, yep, that one right there. That was page 5. Okay, let's start with your committed OPEB line. Can you explain the relationship for our listening audience between that and the resolution 565 for retiree health insurance? The two, I think, link together in an important way.
Sure. Was 565 the health insurance? Is that the one that we talked about earlier? I don't have my packet right in front of me.
Yes, Carlene, it's the Medicare Advantage for $235 for each member.
Excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that question. So within each of our contracts that we have, we actually are obligated to pay our, or we are obligated to, we have, let me just say it this way. Okay. Within each of the contracts, employees are entitled to vacation time, sick time. They are entitled to certain benefits regarding their health insurance, dental insurance. As they move into retirement, obviously they don't have dental insurance, but they are still obligated to, we are obligated to uphold our contractual, the contractual obligations to them. And so what I wanted to say with that is that every obligation that we have for every employee that we have is tallied up. That's what Kathy did at the audit committee. That's what she does in her report. And so when she tallies that all up, that came up to that number of $1.1 billion. So what's that saying is that if we had to close our doors today, if we were to go bankrupt and we could not sustain our obligations any longer, as it stood as at the end of June 30th of this year, we owed our employees $1.1 billion. So we have depleted the OPEB, and again, OPEB is it's an accounting method. There was an incident that happened in the private industry that brought this forward. It trickled over and spilled over into school districts. However, it is here. It's a reality for us. And again, it really shows what would we have to pay out if we closed our doors tomorrow. I don't know if I said that eloquently enough, but it's an absolute obligation that if we had to pay out to all of our employees what we owed them under contractual obligations, this is the amount that would be due, is be the 1.1 billion. We are asking to put 10 million back into the reserve to help meet that obligation. We will not ever reach, obviously, 1.1 billion. It won't be a reality for us, but it's a requirement as an accounting standard.
Yeah, thank you. So my understanding, and you can check me if I'm wrong, but because reporting of this item is recent, say in the last decade, as part of our annual financial statements, and this is for, as you said, it happened in industry, but it had an effect on all governmental unit agencies as well. So it's a huge sum. It's an overwhelming sum, and it's likely to scare a lot of people. But one of the things that institutional lenders, bond issuers have done is they've already taken that into account when they determine our creditworthiness. Just as they take into account, to some extent, the fact that our capital, our borrowing for capital purposes is reimbursable by the state, and therefore, to a large extent, guaranteed. Have I misstated anything yet, Carlene?
I don't think so. I'm listening as attentively as I can to hear where you're going with your questioning.
Right, so that was more a comment, not a question. It's to try to help the non-financial folks put their minds at ease that notwithstanding the size of the number, creditors and bond issuers don't look at that number and freak out and say, you'll never be able to repay a debt to us. They've already calculated in the fact that government entities tend not to go bankrupt. There are backstops to prevent that from happening. So they discount that to a large degree. But so you'll note that the three committed at the top have one kind of big problem with them, and that is the one we've just been talking about, the OPEB. Those committed funds were all created on May 2012 by resolution 2011-12-786. And they were established. Workers' comp was established with 5 million. Insurance claims was established with 1 million. And other post-employment benefits was established not at 10 million, but at $20,889,758. The slide after this, you describe the difference between committed, assigned, and unassigned. And you'll note that funds that are committed by the board cannot be expended without another resolution from the board, either rescinding the first resolution or authorizing an expenditure. And there's no such resolution. The only resolution on the books is resolution 2011-12, colon 786 from May 2012. So notwithstanding that it was stated in the financials at year end at 10 million, we have a problem with it being represented at 10 million.
I'm sorry, this is Carrie Couples in accounting. I'd like to address that a little bit. There were a couple of resolutions passed subsequent to the original resolution that you mentioned that I can forward along to the board for review.
Did they explicitly rescind or adjust the dollar value to the committed funds?
They did adjust the dollar values and they addressed them in a range to provide some flexibility.
Well,
thank you, Carrie. Can you send those to our board clerk, Kalia, and she'll make sure that the entire board gets it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that would be a huge relief to me to know that that processes were followed. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
My next point is about the assigned transportation. This has been presented to the board before, and the board has talked at length about it, including at our at the presentation of the CAFR during the audit committee. And I think that the board is really very much committed to ensuring that transportation dollars are available when we do scale up to full in-person learning. And so one of the items that I forwarded to the to my colleagues and everyone on the Finance Committee distribution was a resolution that would commit these transportation dollars in the same way that our insurance liability fund was committed. This is a way of elevating transportation and demonstrating to the public that we're serious about keeping these funds safe from any other use. And I say that because, again, pointing to the definitions you have on page 6, the authority to assign funds or move them from assigned to unassigned has been delegated to upper management. That was done through policy 5600. So the CFO or the superintendent can authorize the movement of funds back and forth between assigned and unassigned without board's specific action. So one of the items I forwarded to the full board was a resolution to commit the dollars that have been indicated there on page 5 they're the same dollars that were listed in our financial statements and discussed at our audit committee, and elevate those to committed funds. So I look forward to having those discussed in Thursday's meeting. My next point, again on page 5, whoever's driving the PowerPoint.
Commissioner Powell, I'd actually like to see if anybody else has their hand up, and then we can come back to you.
That's fine.
I saw that Mr. Clark, Commissioner Clark had his hand up, but I don't know if he took it down, if he had a question.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. I did have a question, but it was answered, so I took my hand down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Powell.
Okay, and my next point on their assigned, the self-funded health insurance. This is, in fact, the rate stabilization reserve that was authorized by a memorandum of agreement between the unions and the administration when we committed to self-funding, also back in 2012. And I forwarded a resolution that would likewise elevate this to committed status to ensure that it's always available for its intended purpose and not encroached upon. As I said, anything in the assigned can, with the stroke of a pen, be reduced to unassigned. So as a board, we don't want that to happen. We, we signed on to that agreement. When we moved to a self-insured health insurance plan. And I think that concludes all of my comments on this presentation.
All right, I don't see any additional hands up, so nobody has any additional questions about the presentation. On my agenda, and this may have changed, Dr. Myers-Smalls, I have you also presenting, but that was removed for tonight.
Correct.
Correct, okay. So I apologize, I printed the agenda from Friday.
All good, thank you for asking.
Thank you. So up next is discussions on 4 different policies. And I do apologize because it might get a little bit confusing. So I'm gonna start with policy number 6700, which is the purchasing policy. And this is just some conversation around it. I did ask our board clerk to email the board on Friday just to have some time over the weekend and Monday to review it and come with any questions or recommendations. I will ask board members if you have written changes that you want to propose, that you forward those to the board clerk so that we can use the word tracking. That way we can update that way. Kalia, is that okay for you? You're muted.
That is, yeah, that is totally fine. Yes, thank you.
Just want to make sure. So.
Commissioner LeBron?
Yes.
The purchasing policy that was forwarded to us is identical to what is on the board on the website. So at present, there are no specific changes under consideration. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so what we asked the board to do was to read it prior to today's meeting and come with any conversations that they wanted to have as a board now. But we also want to accept them in writing to track them in the word tracker. But these are policies that are also tied to Dr. Jallo's report and have deadlines. And I think 2 of these policies, one of them, Dr. Jallo wrote for December. And I don't know which one is the December one off the top of my head, Kalia. I know you sent us a chart too. I didn't print it.
Yes, let me just gather that information really quickly. So the budget policy was asked for us to address that immediately, and the purchasing policy had a December 2020 deadline for review.
Those are the 2 I think that are at the top. I'm sorry.
At the top, right. And then the fund balance policy has at April 2021 date, and the budget transfer policy has a September 2021 date. But there has been an ask from our finance team that we try to get any changes for fiscal policies in before the budget season to facilitate processing.
Yeah. So for purchasing, let me see if anybody has any hands up, because I do have some areas. So Rebecca, I see your hand up, and Commissioner Powell, I don't know if that's an old hand.
No, it's a new hand.
Okay, so Rebecca.
The only concern that I had reading through the purchase is that there's nothing that talks about duplicating services. And one thing that I've noticed as a parent is that, like with an ELA program recently, that it was less than 2 years into the program when the district purchased an additional one. And I didn't know if there was any verbiage or anything that could be added to this to encourage that not to happen as far as duplicating things that already exist.
Okay. Commissioner Powell, Rebecca, I'm writing it down, but you and I can talk.
It's for 6110, the budget policy, sorry.
Oh, we're not there yet. We're on 6,700 still. Sorry. Commissioner Elliott, Vice President Elliott.
Thank you. I had questions about the alternative proposals. The paragraph, I think it's the 4th paragraph, and then it talks about appropriate method of procurement except for procurements under a county contract. Those 6 things that are listed, and particularly what stuck out to me was articles manufactured in state correctional institutions. And that similar language is on the 2nd page under the 1st paragraph, the last sentence. In addition, the district will make purchases from correctional institutions and severely disabled persons through charitable or nonprofit making agencies. So somebody can discuss that language for me, please. What are we purchasing in a correctional institution?
I agree. Let me see. Dr. Myers, do you have anyone from your team that can address that right now? Or would you like to have that on the board log for us to then discuss the second time around and then also discuss the answers?
Well, to make purchases. Yeah, we'll have to get that. I don't think we need to put that on the question log, please, and thank you.
Okay. Vice President Elliott, was that it for this policy for you?
Yes.
Thank you. The only thing I would like to add to the question log, and again, my hope is that we can take those answers, Vice President Elliott, and bring them back here the second time to review publicly. Is that for me on that 2nd page, I think 2 paragraphs after the paragraph that Vice President Elliott just mentioned, that the purchasing agent will not be required to secure alternative proposals for and it states 3 scenarios. Emergencies where time is a crucial factor. I just feel like that is too vague for me as a commissioner, and who determines what an emergency is? And I think that should be spelled out a little bit more. Procurements for where there is no possibility of competition, the sole source items. I think there also has to be a clause that is reevaluated periodically, whether it's 6 months or every year, to ensure that there's no new competition that has been created. And that way we're not, I guess, cornering one part of the market with a vendor when in reality more vendors have come forward to produce the same products or opportunities and potentially at more cost-effective way. And then just very small procurements, facilitation of competition would not be cost effective. I don't know what that means in a bidding world. And so I would just need more clarity around what that means when someone reads that. I feel like we should bid everything that we possibly can bid, small or big. And that is the most cost-effective way to know. And again, if we just make the assumption, then what could potentially happen is that someone has a monopoly based on the relationship that they may have with people in the district versus the true authentic possibility of being the most cost-effective. And that's all I have for this one, but I'll double check to see if any other commissioners have any other feedback. Commissioner Elliott, is that an old hand too? And
Oh, it is.
Okay.
My apologies.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Commissioner LeBron.
Yes, was that an old hand or new hand?
No, it's a new hand. Follow up on Commissioner Elliott's point and your own. I know this isn't where you were going with it, Commissioner Elliott, but on products provided through correctional facilities, I'm recalling that one of Governor Cuomo's press conferences around COVID early on in the spring, he made a really big deal about hand sanitizers being made in our correctional facilities, and essentially being able to put those out in competition with the private sector. So that's the only example I can think of where we would actually source any of our needs from a correctional facility. Only because the governor brought it up fairly recently. To Commissioner LeBron's point about the securing supplies on an emergency basis, Callie, if you could scroll down to the first of the three, that where was that? Purchasing agent, that one right there. This is precisely why we pass so many resolutions approving catalog purchases. This is why we collect bids on what the lowest price for any given supply or repair part or what have you from different vendor catalogs, is so that we already have the lowest bid on contract, and so that we wouldn't have to use this particular function in the policy. That's the entire purpose of approving, usually annually, but then we put it out for a new RFP every 5 years. Lists of products that we purchase from various different vendors, is because we've already done the work to determine that those are the lowest prices we can get.
Okay, but I just want to point out that there have been occasions over my last 2.5 years on the board where that actually has not been the case. And we have had vendors just based on the relationships that people have in the district. And so we don't go out and make sure that that is the lowest price that we're getting. We just make the assumption that 10 years ago there was no competition, and that 10 years passed and that there's still no competition, and that's based on an assumption. There's no actual bidding that goes out and requests for proposals that go out that are updated. So again, this is an area that I would like the board to consider kind of fleshing it out a little bit more, so that it is more directive to administration and the staff, that the expectation is that they do go out and bid, that they do have a review process, so that we have the most cost-effective purchasing possible for the district, and that it's not just based on assumptions that we do because the bid was from a couple of years ago or 5 years ago. So I just want to put that out there. If there are no other points, I want to move on to policy, the budget policy 6110. And that one is the one that is due immediately from Dr. Jallo's report. Vice President Elliott, is that your hand up? Thank you. I'm going to call on you.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Just one question with regard to the, and this is in the 1, 2, 3, 4, in the 6th paragraph about program evaluation results. needed to be tied with the proposed budget, that the most recent program evaluation results should be included in the proposed budget. Now, is that something that we are going to be doing, or is that something that we should have been doing and did not get the results in the past when we would, when the superintendent would propose the budget?
Yeah, so my understanding is that this is something that was already in our budget policy based on resolution. So it was adopted in 2002, amended in 2005, again amended in 2010, and then, so that was the last official amendment was 2010. But yes, that this is what we should have been getting. We haven't. Not for every program and not in a consistent manner.
So can I just ask the superintendent about, will we see in future proposed budgets, will we see program evaluation results?
Commissioner Elliott, that's something that Dr. Morris is working on with that, because that's her wheelhouse. So we'll figure out what makes the best sense as far as presenting that evaluation and what that entails.
All right, thank you. That's it, Commissioner LeBron.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell? You're muted. I'm sorry.
Thank you for telling me. I wouldn't have stopped. The paragraph below the one currently highlighted, if you note the last sentence of that paragraph, it will be reviewed annually with the Board of Education as part of the budget process. The clause that follows is no longer necessary. It's not even really useful from a historical purpose. I would recommend a period, the end of the third line, and deleting beginning with 2006-07 budget pass process.
So just for clarity, you're saying delete beginning with the 2006-2007 budget process, but leave the rest of it in there?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I don't see any additional hands up. So the only comment on this policy I had was that we annually approve a specific budget calendar, but in our own policy, it says that that calendar is developed by the chief financial officer and recommended by the superintendent in accordance, and it says attach exhibit A. And I don't know if this budget policy second part where it says second quarter is the exhibit A. But I just had some questions around the language in that. And I don't know. Yeah. So here it says finalized by the Board of Education at the November business meeting. And I don't know if we want to keep the month of November in there as we've been moving towards just changing our calendar overall.
To document, one quick question. So then, are you suggesting that we remove the November, or are you suggesting an edit to Exhibit A altogether?
I would say an edit to Exhibit A because we finalized, I think, in October this year. But I know that this is an ongoing conversation around our budget process and our calendar and making sure that we're taking the necessary time to review it.
Okay, thanks.
The other edit is just the funding priorities to the superintendent. Here is listed in the third quarter. And then in the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, it says the budget shall be designed to reflect the board approved goals and objectives and the district strategic plan for the education of our students. I just know in past, we have done our board kind of goals and priorities a little bit after the process of the budget. And I would like to see that potentially aligned a little bit better with the timeline so that if the superintendent and her team are doing the budget development, that they have our board goals and objectives at the very beginning of the process so that it's something that could be aligned from the very beginning. And I don't know if that makes sense to the other commissioners. I don't know if you guys have any feedback on that. Okay. So if no one else has any feedback on budget policy 6110, we're going to move on. The next one is a new budget transfer policy. So this is a brand new budget transfer policy based on a number of recommendations and reasons. I'll remind the board that Kalia did some research and that NSBA had a template for this type of resolution because there are school districts across the US and across New York State that have budget transfer policies that require the school board to make approvals for large sums of budget transfers. We have not had a policy like this before, but it is an important policy for us to have so that we are aware when we pass a budget that if there are a large portion of a transfer in a line item that we are fully aware that that's happening versus unfortunately what's happened in this district in the past. And we're not aware when these things are occurring historically. So, and then our CFO has provided some language in here that she feels is the best fit for this district based on our budget size and average transactions and things that occur behind the scenes. So we'll present that today. And if you guys have any questions on the amount. Commissioner Powell, is that a new hand?
It is.
Okay, yes.
This question is for Kalia. I do recall this was sent out, not with the packet for today, but like before last meeting, correct?
Yes, this was sent out on Friday with all the, asking for all the policy input. Was sent out Friday and was also sent out, I believe, on Monday. But no, for some reason I did double check this afternoon and it wasn't reattached to the new email, but it was sent out several times leading out to this meeting, firstly on Friday to get feedback.
Thank you. I know I'd seen it before. I was just trying to follow along with the bouncing ball. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm looking on Friday. I'm still not seeing it. Oh,
I'm sorry. Will, you done?
You said Friday.
Yep, 7:06 p.m.
I'm looking at the packet from.
The document is called Budget Transfer Policy Updated.
Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes, I only had one quick question where it says Chief Financial Officer will report any other transfers to the board. Should we put a dollar limit on that also? Because I'm sure we, don't need reports on $5,000 transfers.
I'm actually going to refer that question to our CFO currently, but so historically, Commissioner Clark, they do let us know about transfers, but they're done after the fact, and Carlene can speak more about our current or previous practices, some things that she and her team have done since starting to kind of create better transparency and more clarity around how things are maneuvered. That kind of led her to give some of these recommendations, but Carlene, I'll let you speak.
Thank you. Yes, just like we were speaking earlier about trend analysis and what has happened in the past and what that means to us at current time and what we can do in the future about it. We have an entire journal document that I have pulled from last year. And again, I keep track of all and approve all of the budget transfers for this year. So looking at the trends within those documents, where the money is coming from and where it's going, it gives me an idea of how to better build our budget at the beginning. So those budget transfers are not going to be necessary later on. So that in and by itself will significantly reduce the number of transfers. I don't have a problem, Commissioner Clark, if you would like a low end on the report, I'm happy to accommodate, but I think what you're going to see overall is there will be a drastic reduction this coming year in the number of budget transfers that the district will experience regardless.
Okay, if you feel it's unnecessary, then I can live with the way it is. I just didn't want every time there was a minor transfer having to report out to the board.
I'm sorry, Carlene. I was gonna just reiterate that that's a great point, because we had these conversations, Carlene and I, when, so this also was driven, Mr. Clark, from the state comptroller's office kind of highlighting some things that had occurred. And I spoke with other districts. They have these types of board policies, and that boards approve it. And I think that's why our CFO landed on the $500,000 as a starting point. Because if you look at the example, they said 2,000, and we're like, that would require too many. She would be coming to the board with too many smaller, minute resolutions for very small things that she can manage on her own.
No, I agree 100% with 500,000. I was just speaking of the low end, where it says that she will have to report out any other transfers to the board.
So are you making a suggestion that we minimize what amount has to be reported to the board?
Yes, but I'm relatively new, so if that's not an issue, I'm fine with the way it's written now.
Are you ready for the next question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The last sentence around will be assessed annually. One of the problems we've had with policies passed is not identifying a time or a condition for those evaluations. I'd like to see language identical to what is in the policy we passed that we just discussed on the budget, such that it reads, will be reviewed annually as part of the budget process. That way, essentially all of our financial budget-related policies will, by being incorporated into the budget process, will automatically get reviewed.
I'm gonna have Kalia put that down, and then we can further discuss it. I actually like that idea. In my mind, I'm thinking at the end when we pass the budget, so that we're reviewing it before July 1 for the new budget, so that we know whether that made sense. I don't know if that makes sense to folks, but I see where you're going, Commissioner Powell, that we should assign it for better accountability, even for ourselves, to an actual date of some sort.
Commissioner Powell, just for clarity, so you are suggesting that the annual assessment be done prior to the budget or be folded into the budget process? Is that what you're asking? I'm sorry, I want to make sure I document that correctly.
Yeah, the policy will be
Yes.
assessed. That's essentially the same as language in other policies, such as in the budget policy, we have language that says the policy will be reviewed annually with the Board of Education as part of the budget process. We've just up that same language and place it in this policy. Now then the question still remains for both of those policies. Are we evaluating at the front end of our budget process, the back end? You know, where exactly? It's still vague, but hopefully when people pick up the fact that the language is identical, that there'll be an effort made to review them at the same time.
Commissioner LeBron?
Yes. I don't have anything additional, and I don't see any additional hands raised from other commissioners. So the last policy is the fund balance policy, number 6500. This one is addressed in Dr. Jallo's report for the board to have updated and completed and reviewed by April of 2020. Yeah, and there's this one already got some markups. So I see Vice President Elliott, your hand is up. Commissioner Powell, I see your hands up.
I just wanted to, before you go, Commissioner LeBron, I just wanted to, if it might help, the fund balance policy that is currently on the website and that is currently enacted is one that was kind of pulled apart with the finance team, and they suggested a change to the fund balance policy. So essentially, it's as if it's a rewrite of the policy. So that's why almost everything is kind of marked up, because essentially the policy is up, it would be an amendment to the policy, but it's not essentially a new policy since we already have one in place. So you'll see the comments there kind of explaining what changes have been suggested to what we currently have in place right now.
Okay. Vice President Elliott.
I think I had some difficulty in confusion in reading this policy, but what I thought that I read in here is that in my interpretation is that we can exhaust fund balances given our current situation, whatever that current situation may be, that we can exhaust our fund balances. And I just think that that may not be prudent, because even if we would be using some of those resources for the current scenario, what happens if there's a scenario tomorrow that we don't have those resources for? So I just think it's unhealthy fiscally for us to be without a fund balance and just having and using it, it's exhausting it and exhausted it at the 100% level. I mean, you know, we've got to make funding our fund balances a high priority, because we have to look at what's going to happen in the future. You know, what's going to happen 3 years down the road, what's going to happen 5 years down the road, you know, what's going to happen 10 years down the road. And you know, we tend to depend on you know, the federal and state government. I think part of that is okay. But what happens when they're in trouble? When we look at the federal government now, you know, they're giving all of this money out, but, you know, we have the largest deficit, and I even think the debt than we've had in history. You know, the elect Secretary of the Treasury is already talking about, you know, those numbers and indicating that, you know, we may have to raise revenue in some kind of way. And of course, that always means taxes. And so I just think that, so my point to that is that, you know, will there be the funding available, you know, to help us out at the level that we want to be helped out? I don't know. And I just think that as we develop this policy, and maybe I didn't read it, maybe I missed something here, but I do think that we have to make sure that we have our own funding so that we can sustain ourselves as much as we possibly can. So those are my thoughts to, you know, revising this policy. I just think that we have to be good financial fiscal stewards, and that means having a sound fund balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell, I think your hand was up. I don't know if I see it again.
That's right. To react to Commissioner Elliott, I fully understand where that nervousness comes from. There's a segment of a paragraph that talks about how funds are to be drawn down. First from restricted, then from committed, then from assigned, then from unassigned. That is more or less a condition laid out in the GASB 54. It's what's currently stated in our current fund balance policy, and so that carries forward, even though the language of this one is quite different. That's not really a change that's being proposed. What's important to note is, even though that's the order in which events occur, the district cannot tap into restricted funds except for the purpose they're restricted for, that is to say, debt service. They can't then tap into committed funds except insofar as it's for the purpose that the funds were committed, and that requires a board resolution. So then it goes to assigned. Is that the purpose was, you know, is the reason for the drawdown part of the assigned, the purpose those funds were assigned to? And then finally, if it doesn't fit any of those categories, then you go to the unassigned. Does that help? You're muted.
Yep. I think in the other policy, then we talk about something about a 4% fund balance.
That's the point that I wanted to make after resolving your concern. Our current policy is 5%.
Okay.
And then there's a provision that should the fund balance exceed 15%, then funds could be used for basically one-shot purchases or one, you know, single event purchases, non-recurring.
I just want to clarify, and I have to say, I think this was probably the one that's most confusing, Commissioner Elliott, because there are a couple of, like, I feel like copies of different variations floating
right
out in the website. Our policy says 5 to 5 up, not to exceed 15%. So we didn't set anything between 5. It's a minimum of 5% up to 15%. And that's how I believe Dr. Jallo also quoted that we should just follow our own policy that we currently have within those two numbers, the 5 to 15%. And then this edits here, there's a recommendation that if we go down, I saw on the side that, that we have a minimum of 4% of operating expenditures. And what's quoted in here is actually the state website. So I went to the state website and then I pulled up. So first and foremost, whoever did the first edit on the front of it to talk about the GASB. I appreciate whoever kind of spelled that out, because in our original policy, it just says that we're going to adhere to and stays GASB in the article and doesn't define how they're connected. And I had to Google it. I was like, I don't even know what this means. And again, I want us to be conscious when we write policies that any parent, any staff, any person in the community opens it and has an understanding of what we're talking about. So I just want to put that out there. So whoever made that recommendation for edit, yes, I support it. It's much more clear. But I went to the website for GFOA because that's what's kind of referenced here. And on their website, they actually, I couldn't find, and maybe I didn't take enough time, but I could not find the 4%. So I think this is where we also should discuss a little bit about where that number kind of falls for us and what that means. But what the website says that we should do 2 months of regular general fund operating revenues or operating expenditures, and the choice of revenue or expenditures is a basis of comparison. It may be dictated by what is more predictable in our particular circumstances. Furthermore, a government's particular situation often may require a level of unrestricted fund balance in the general fund significantly in excess of this recommended minimum level. In any case, such measures should be applied with the context of long-term forecasting, thereby avoiding the risk of placing too much emphasis upon the level of unrestricted fund balance in the general fund at any one time. It says in establishing a policy governing the level of unrestricted fund balances in the general fund, the government should consider a variety of factors, including the predictability of its revenues and the vitality of its expenditures. And I thought about that in the current COVID state that we're in. I don't feel like we have a good predictability of what our revenues are going to look like, the next year and the year after that, because of the impact of COVID financially. It's perceived exposure to significant one-time outlays. So disasters, immediate capital needs, state budget cuts. They have state budget cuts highlighted in a couple of these. And I was like, those are the scenarios we're kind of in. The potential impact on the entity's bond ratings. Thought that was interesting. Commitment and assignment. So there's a number of things and factors that they say we should consider even in the policy development in regards to how much we're saving. But then I saw that there was a recommendation here for 4% of our operating expenditures. I'm not sure where that came from, but I think this is where the board needs to decide if 4% of our operating expenditures, what that total will look like, and if that is going to be enough for what's to come.
But is that what the finance department is recommending, Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I'll let either Dr. Leslie Myers-Smalls or our CFO speak. I'm not sure where the 4% came from. I got the copies too, and I was just kind of going through them, but I'm not sure where the 4% recommendation came from. But because there was a reference to the GFOA, I was like, well, let me go straight to their website and see what they're talking about.
Arlene, would you respond to that?
Sure.
4%.
Sure. And so if you actually took 4% of our operating expenditures for 1920 and just use that as an example, that would come up to $26 million. And so what that's saying is, again, if you go back to that chart that we were using earlier, that 4% is saying that it would be, that would go into the unassigned fund balance category. My understanding, Commissioner LeBron, is that if you take the other, where you're talking 1 to 2 months worth of operating revenues or expenses, and should reside in unrestricted. Unrestricted includes assigned, committed, and unassigned. So it's a combination of the three. But really the true expert who did an extensive amount of research on this matter, worked with the auditors, did research with the other big five, is truly Carrie Couples. So I would like to give her credit and to have her come on screen if she'd be willing to do so and walk us through this as she found it to be in the other districts and in speaking with the auditors.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, I'll address a few of the points that came up. If you look at, to your point, Commissioner LeBron, you actually were right on point when you talked about the predictability of revenues and expenditures. The reason operating expenditures were chosen instead of operating revenues was exactly that. In the next few years, our revenues are going to be extremely difficult to predict, and our expenditures will by and large end up being a function of the revenue. So if you had to pick one, I think we went for operating revenues because it was less, at least it was linked to whatever the expenditures end up or revenues end up being. So that was a deliberate decision based on the point that you made. Where did the 4% come from? So we, in discussions with multiple sources, we went back. It was recommended by the OSC that we refresh our policy, and the original 5 to 15% recommendation for the combination of combined plus assigned plus unassigned comes from when this whole GASB 54 came out circa 2011. That was their original recommendation. So they've since stepped off on that, and as you've seen with some of your research, they recommend 2 months. In a lot of cases, revenues or operating expenditures, or they state you know it's a recommendation, but you really need to determine what best suits the needs of your operation or the nature of your business. So when I did the calculation for the 2 months of operating revenues and expenditures, it was a big, tall leap for us to get to, and it really a stretch. And by all means, the fund balance policy was written in the spirit of trying to build up over time a more robust balance. And so given that was such a restrictive, unattainable goal, really, and I laid out the analysis I'd be happy to share with everybody to look at this week if you want. So I went back and I said, okay, well, this clearly is going to be difficult. So what are the other big five doing? I excluded New York City because they're really, that's their whole own entity. And I looked at Syracuse, Buffalo, and Yonkers. And I looked at the commonalities, the trends, and I saw that the benchmark seemed to be, at least for 2 of them, the 4% of unrestricted. And then I did an analysis on the 2 months of operating expenses or revenues, an analysis on the 4% of unrestricted, unassigned, which is only one of the 5 categories, and to see if it was more reasonable. And while the focus is on the unassigned threshold of 4%, it's not to say that we shouldn't be putting money away in those other categories. It's meant to give us some flexibility. In the biggest textbook case they've always given for fund balances in the event of a pandemic. Well, 10 years ago, you think, yeah, better, more chance of winning the lottery, right? But now the worst nightmare is upon us. So we're in that classic textbook case, and if we had been in a better position going in, we wouldn't be deliberating as much, or I would say having to make all of cuts upon cuts that we've been forced our hand. So there was quite a bit of analysis done to see what other districts in New York State were doing. And also I'll mention the categories that we have for the other parts of fund balance, the different flavors, if you will, the health insurance, workers' comp, OPEB. These are all commonalities out there amongst the other districts. It's not like we're picking frivolous things, or, you know, you see a commonality there in goals.
Carrie, did you care to comment on the use of the committed funds with the other districts? I know that was part of your analysis.
Yes, so the one thing I did notice is we're actually the only district that commits funds. So it caused me to wonder, there's got to be a reason for that. And I think, very broadly speaking, and this may not be a popular answer, but I think it's to give management a little bit of flexibility in reaction to unforeseen circumstances such as a pandemic, because it does require a resolution in a lapse of time in order to get money out of these. That's the conclusion I came to. It's not to say that the board certainly is within their right to commit funds, just have to keep the flexibility issue in mind. And it's not, I mean, truly the management, we would be cited in an audit if we started spending these assigned funds however we pleased. We really don't have the leeway. We still have to keep within the guidelines that we state are intended to use those funds for. But if you look at the other Syracuse and Buffalo comparative to our district, on the analysis I did, you will see that we are sorely underfunded in comparison.
Commissioner LeBron, can I react to Carrie?
Yes.
Thank you. Carrie, I heard your interpretation why the big five do not have committed, but there's another potential explanation. Our policy delegates the authority to assign to the superintendent or his or her delegates. If the other big five do not delegate that authority, then the very same funds that we have currently as committed would be in the assigned. There's no other place for them because you can't restrict them by law. Only, you know, external agencies can restrict. I would theorize, and I invite you to research this, that Syracuse, Buffalo, Yonkers do not delegate the authority to establish assigned fund balances.
Okay, yeah, it's something I can definitely look into for sure.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
Can I just ask for clarity on something Commissioner Powell just said? Because Commissioner Powell, I saw that in the original policy, and then the one that's marked up, that is crossed off, that delegation to authorize assigned fund balance for a specific purpose to the superintendent or their designee. And I just want the, again, I don't know who, and I don't know, Carrie, if you gave this recommendation or who gave this recommendation. Kalia, on my page, it's on the second page at the very top. So, no. No, let's see, under assigned fund balance. or assigned fund balance. Nope. Go down right there. Let's see. So here it says the board authorizes the superintendent to serve. So on my, again, I have like 3 of these and I don't know why. On one of them that I have, that is actually crossed out.
Commissioner LeBron, if you're looking at the copy, a counter proposal to everyone on the distribution, my policy proposal doesn't actually change it. It just places it in a different part of the policy. I'm not suggesting that we not delegate that authority. I just put it in a different place. And part of the reason I put it in a different place is that I kept as much of our previously existing policy as I could, and it already existed there. So if you look for it in a part not highlighted in any way, you'll find that the language is still in my proposal. Also, while I have the floor, the 4%, we do indicate in our existing policy our intention to follow Government Finance Officers Association recommended best practices. That's the GFOA. That's currently what our policy is built around. That, as Carrie said, that's where the 5% came from. And if the GFOA's recommendation is 4%, again, for unrestricted or unassigned only, you know, I'm certainly, I'm still committed to following GFOA's recommendations, but I did have a lot of concern about other aspects of the policy that's being circulated, and that's why I produced a counter proposal, if you will. Looks like we have plenty of time to continue discussing it if we don't have to take action until April.
Yeah, we do have some time on this one. And what I'll probably do, Commissioner Powell, is any feedback that came from tonight, in addition to your proposals, we could probably highlight them in a different color and color format it, and then redistribute one copy with everyone's feedback, including administration's. And we'll color code it and label them so everybody knows who made what recommendation, because I do have like 3 floating copies right now. And it's hard to kind of straddle between 3 different edits. And I just want to put that out there. And that's my own fault. I printed one from before. There was some attachments to Kalia's, and then I went to the website and printed one, and I confused myself. But if that's okay with you guys, that's what I'll propose. So I'll take all of your recommendations, Commissioner Powell, along with administration and anything that came out of tonight, and color code them, and then redistribute one copy with all the edits.
Commissioner LeBron?
Yes, Vice President Elliott.
Yeah, I just want to understand what we're doing holistically. Because we depleted the fund balance, and because the policy says that we need to have a 5 to 15% of our operating budget to be in the fund balance, that's the purpose as to why we're changing it. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, and that information also is outdated to what's recommended, which was what I was reading as I went to the state's website, and according to the GFOA, they have some new recommendations on what districts should save and which way they should do it. So the other part of why, well, this one doesn't come up till April 2020 and Dr. Jallo's recommendations. So she also embedded some of the finance policies along with other policies throughout the district, but because this is the finance, we're covering the finance ones, and gave us some specific timelines of when she wanted this board to review it, address it, update it. And this is one of those. But I also think going into the new budget year, we should have some really good clarity on what we actually are going to save and how we're going to save it. Because we don't know. I know that I just feel like we don't know what 2021 is going to bring, but we certainly don't know what 2022 is going to bring, which is where I feel like we're going to really start to feel more of the impact of 2020.
And I would think that we certainly need to have more conversation around this because to your point, we just, there's a lot of X factors out there over the next few years. And I think we just have to have a broad understanding of what we're saying with regard to our fund balances, given that there are these unknown factors. And so what are we saying, and how? I think the key thing for me also is that we're going to stay true to what our decision is going to be around the fund balance, because again, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, those are just unknowns financially. And you know, how are we going to restore, if we ever have been, restore a healthy financial position? So I guess I offer that we continue to have more discussion around this, because this is one of the main things why we were elected, to ensure that we are good stewards over and we provide the financial oversight. So I'd like for us to have more conversation around this before, you know, we really make the decision on the policy. Thank you.
Okay, it will be noted, and I'll make sure we continue to have conversations around this policy. We have until April, but I think something you just mentioned, I do want to uplift, is that even if we don't change the policy until April, we still have a new budget season upon us. And we as a board do have to decide as a body with the superintendent what we will be putting in our fund balance. And our current policy says 5 up to 15%. And we have to decide where we're going to land in those two numbers that make sense and that puts us at least on a path toward some fiscal stability.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any additional hands. And with that, I am going to turn over. It is 7:42 p.m. The Finance Committee is complete. I'm going to turn the gavel over to President Van White.
Thank you very much, Commissioner LeBron. Very comprehensive discussion, and it allowed us to follow through on Dr. Jallo's recommendations and also do a sort of a check-in on where we're at financially with this district. Thank you to our Finance Director, Carlene, for her update as well. Looking at the agenda, it doesn't leave much more for us to discuss except to have some conversation about that conversation we had at our last meeting. At the top of this meeting, I indicated to the members of the community that the board needed to talk to our attorneys about a resolution that suggested that we should reduce board member salaries. That conversation requires, that topic requires that we speak to our attorneys. And like anybody else out there, anytime you speak to your attorney, you're entitled to do that confidentially. So I'm going to ask one of them, well, actually, I don't even need a motion to go into executive session because we're having a confidential conversation with our attorney. After we finish that conversation, we may come back out of that conversation and have additional conversation on that motion that was made regarding reducing board member salary. So if those of you are still intending on sticking around, our meeting is not adjourned. The board is going to go have that conversation. We'll come back. I don't know how long it's going to be, but we will be coming back into open session. All right, Tom. Everybody, for those of you Board of Education gladiators who are still around, we are still, in fact, still here. We were talking to, as I indicated, we were talking to our attorney. As you all know, some of you may know that when you speak to your attorney, as I've said, it is often done in a confidential session. So we've had that conversation about that proposal. At this particular time, I am going to lift the motion, the prior motion from our last meeting about board member salaries from the table so that it can be discussed today. I would like, with my colleagues' permission, to be the first to address the issue, and only to note that we have discussed this issue with our general counsel, and he has looked at the issue for us in advance and has advised us that we cannot change our salaries this fiscal year. Does anybody else want to be heard on this motion that has been lifted from the table?
Yes, President White, I'm seeking permission to withdraw this based on legal counsel's advice. And I just want to note that this board is going to be working on a resolution moving forward. And so this is not the end of it, but I am asking to withdraw.
Thank you. So long as there is no objection to that motion to withdraw, and I don't hear any, that motion has been granted and that the motion is withdrawn. Folks should know, consistent with what Commissioner LeBron has said, our general counsel is asked to continue to look into this issue and has been directed to report back to our governance committee on any updates and further direction that the board might take on this particular issue. We do have to take a survey, and no one had to remind me of it today. It's like the first time, but I did want to tell you all something that's done offline. It's not related to a survey. I did want the community to know that the Board of Education, given the struggles that some of our employees are having, every year, the Board of Education and the district staff, central office staff, do something for Christmas. We all thought it was appropriate to provide resources for those employees in the district that are struggling because of decisions that have been made, unfortunately, and has resulted in them not having work and maybe some of the resources they normally would have for the holiday season. And as a result of the Board of Education's efforts, $500 has been collected. That money will be used to buy gift cards, so that people can buy whatever resources they need to provide for their families during this holiday season. So on behalf of the community, I want to thank my colleagues for generously giving of their resources so that folks' burdens this season might be a little less difficult. So now we're going to do that survey. Everybody finished, Madam Clerk?
Not yet. I'm just waiting on one or two more, actually, depending on who is participating tonight.
While you're doing that, I want to thank board staff, including Francine, who helped us collect the funds for those gift cards. Thank you, Francine, if you're still watching or listening. We appreciate that. Again, we hope to make a difference in some folks' lives, as small as it might be, and some folks' lives, employees' lives this holiday season. We all set?
We are all set. Thank you.
All right. I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Malloy, seconded by, I think, Commissioner Adams. All those in favor? Say good night.